The focus of this conversation is about identifying patterns for AI solutions in business and understanding the process of AI adoption by the enterprise. And let's begin this discussing the goals of AI looking through the prism of a following mental model. So, one view is that the goal of AI is to help people as a copilot, which is a sustaining innovation. Think Microsoft is a major beneficiary of that. And not everybody needs or wants that. And then the other possible goal is to replace people, which is a disruptive innovation. And that scares even more people. So, Rinat, what is your opinion about the goals of AI?
So I've been working with teams that try to build LM-driven products or AI-driven products, ship them to market. And the thing that the teams that tried to use AI as a kind of superpower, or the teams that were approaching AI as something that can replace humans, they failed. The reason was that it's just in practice, it doesn't work out. In theory, this can be scary. This is a perfect narrative for the journalist and mass media to publish and get clickbaity articles. In practice, if you try even to build something that is superpower or that is capable in kind of generalist AI, in practice, it will not be stable. So if you read a lot of tutorials, like you can create agents, you can give them tools, you can give them access to the internet, you can give them a task, for example, to make me rich, and I'll give you any money and give you any tools. That was perfect clickbait. In practice, this doesn't work. So what works instead in practice is treating current generation of generative AIs, like large language models, for example, as a very specific tools. And these specific tools, they have very a lot of limitations. So for example, large language models, they can hallucinate, but they do not hallucinate because they're bad or they're unpredictable. It's just because they're being used wrong. So the approach and the mindset towards AI that helped teams to ship efficient products with LM under hood that help companies and business create value, it's treating AI as small, tiny building blocks, like almost functions. These building blocks are capable of fulfilling some specific functions that are boring or expensive for humans to do. And the best outcomes is when you take an existing, for example, business process, the process that maybe exists for 5 or 10 years in an enterprise, and you identify steps that are maybe extremely boring for humans, and they're very repetitive and mundane. And large language models, or AI, they're very good at pattern detections. They're very good at boring stuff that are easy and repetitive. So the approach that works, we look at the existing workflows. We look at existing human organizational process. We identify the piece where humans waste a lot of time, or people waste a lot of time, because they're boring, repetitive, and mundane. And we just replace this tiny bit with LM. That's where we get the most value. And frequently enough in companies, place is where companies are bottlenecked for growth. Like I've seen cases where a company would want to handle more sales, but there is boring process in identifying potential leads that requires reading through thousands of documents. And they would love to grow more. They're already profitable, but they cannot grow more because they cannot read through these PDF documents that fast enough. The solution, you actually don't replace humans there because humans are irreplaceable. Their expertise is unique. You just augment existing workflows with LLMs. Like, for example, take the mundane thing of scanning for lots of documents and extracting some information. So essentially doing pre-scanning or pre-censoring to LLMs, and then humans work as a supervisor there, and they take good leads forward. And this pattern repeats over and over again. So long story short, AIs, in my experience, they cannot replace humans. They're not smart enough. They're intelligent, but they're also gullible and dumb. But they can augment existing human workflows, and they have their strong points and weak points.
The next question is around enterprise confusion about adopting and harnessing generative AI. And there is an anecdotal evidence that enterprise clients are often confused in 2 ways. First, since there are so many new foundational models, they think that this might be readily easy to do. And then therefore they want to make the unique model without taking into account massive resource requirements. And what have you seen as a practitioner? Is this an accurate description of the issue, or why and how the enterprises are often confused?
So the answer is actually twofold, in my opinion. So first of all, if we're talking about the hot topic, large language models, then it is quite easy for an enterprise to build and create a custom foundational models. If you are Microsoft, maybe Google, OpenAI, or Mistral. So if you're one of these few companies that have enough in-house expertise, enough GPU resources, then you can give a try to creating a new large language model, foundational large language model from scratch. If you're a bit smaller, like for example IBM, then you will probably fail because simply you don't have enough data, you will not have enough expertise, enough in-house experts simply to set up the cluster and the GPU setup just to train the model. And not talking about cleaning the data, gathering the data, and doing all the other magic that is required to train LLM. But you obviously don't have to do that because you can stand on the shoulders of giants and use that. That's one side of the picture. Another side of the picture, if we're talking about training custom models, but maybe even foundational models, but not just full-scale large language models, training a specialized model, which is tiny, which is task-focused, is feasible and it is within the reach even of within a tiny team. One project I've seen, which are creating a custom voice-based assistant for a niche language, they have created their own embedding model, their own voice models, their own wake words on scratch on a tiny budget. And I think it was within the Y Combinator request for startups, they mentioned that one of the topics where they believe that there will be a lot of business, it's when companies will start using tiny, dedicated, fine-tuned models, which are feasible to create, to replace large models. And it is my belief that even tiny task-based models, they'll even have better performance and better return on investment than large models.
The next question I would like to ask is around enterprise AI use cases. I've heard on several occasions that actually the set of enterprise use cases is limited to a few and everything else is pretty much a variation. So how many of the enterprise AI use cases are there for real, in your opinion?
That's a great question. And so far, I've seen pretty much one case, which is Enterprise Glue, essentially taking an existing workflow and augmenting that. But if we look at the spectrum of specific implementations, I'm start seeing that there are three distinct patterns which are interconnected. One pattern, it's the basic, and that's the pattern I like the most. It is data extraction at scale. This pattern has been around actually for more than a decade before the ChatGPT became popular. It's just with ChatGPT, it becomes much easier to accomplish. Example of data extraction at scale is when we have a company that is trying to do lead generation. And they scan the internet, they scan their websites with tenders, maybe they scan new announcements on the website of their competitors, and they extract this unstructured data in a highly structured data, which is then ingested by their marketing or sales. For example, you can be scanning information about products on different marketplaces, and then these products will come with their own data sheets. And you can extract information from these data sheets into structured tables, which will then use to compare your own products to the products of the competitors. There are tools available for that, which will allow you to react quickly to different changes in the marketing and tactics employed by your competition. And you can increase your market share. So the first case, which is underlying, it's data extraction at scale, and it underlies multiple business processes. The second higher level pattern, it's building AI search. It's an example being enterprises have lots of in-house data. It could be documentation, it could be internal marketing materials, it could be codes of conduct and other stuff. And frequently this documentation is spread within the companies, siloed within the organizational boundaries. That's how things grow. That's how companies grow. It's in human nature. And this actually makes it possible to gather information, but that it makes it tricky to find information quickly. Usually you need to maybe find somebody in the company, ask them a question, they will relay you to somebody else, And after wasting a couple of hours or maybe days, you'll find an answer that is needed for your project. And so enterprises are interested in unlocking the potential that is available and fostering collaboration, how it's called, by creating AI system, where this is a pretty much kind of full text search on the entire company data that is driven by large language models that are capable of narrowing down the request to a specific domain or niche and being able to synthesize the proper answer. A quick example of that would be ChatGPT. You can upload a document there and you can ask questions about that. And when we're talking about the enterprise AI search, it is the same thing, but it is in theory possible to ask any question about any of the documentation. And if you invest time in understanding the business domain, structure of information, and knowledge, it will even not hallucinate. So and that's the second type of pattern. And the third type of a pattern, it's actually AI platform. And before we go there, as you can see, there is actually progression. Data extraction is the simplest. It takes unstructured data and it transforms it into structured data. AI search actually builds on top of that, because in order to find the relevant documentation, it actually has to go through all the documents, extract different features from them, extract different entities, and use that as a guiding principle when guiding the user towards proper information. And AI platform actually builds potentially on the AI search and deeper integration between the existing company process and the LLMs. So we're essentially building a system where anybody in the company can use API services, maybe internal documentation, internal procurement services, supply chain things. And within their everyday workflows, there are tiny slivers of LLM or AI embedded. They don't do end-to-end tasks. They don't accomplish everything. They just help to cut a little bit of cognitive load. They just help to make things slightly easier. That's where it pays off really quickly. So there is a fancy word called business copilots, but the way they're being marketed, it's like it's a separate entity that will do the tasks for you. I haven't seen this work out well in practice yet, but what I've seen, it's when, for example, a person is looking up a customer support, he or she, they are looking at the incoming email from the customer. And on the left side, it's the email. On the right side, there is already a quick summary that was compiled by LLM agent that pulls potentially relevant information about this customer, the recent API requests, the recent problems, and the recent, business BI logic used. That's in one case. So in this case, the third pattern, it's AI platform, where existing business process are intertwined with LLMs to help users of this platform do things slightly more efficiently without putting too much stress on LLMs, so that we don't get hallucinations or any problems. We just get slightly more performant.
Have you observed any issues with LLM integration in your line of work?
Yeah, actually a lot, and this has been happening in multiple cases. So the issues are, first of all, we have to divide problems into the categories. Are we using local models or are we using SaaS offerings? And that's the first choice that most of the customers face. And obviously, if we're using a cloud version, then this brings potential issues. First of all, we're getting vendor locked in, because the best, and actually that's my recommendation, large language model is only one. It's ChatGPT. You still have some variants because you can use either OpenAI or much better Azure OpenAI within your region with that data control and stricter SLA, but you're still locked in to one vendor. And lots of companies cannot tolerate that risk. And at this point, the choice is tough. Either you use the best and your teams move fast, or you have to use, if the risk is not acceptable, try using local large language models. And that will have actually a lot of cost, because when you're running your own models, you have to pay a lot. And the quality of the product that you're getting is much lower, because it's impossible to compare. So, but you're avoiding vendor locking. Second type of the issue comes from the nature of large language models is that they hallucinate. And actually, there's even a bigger risk behind. I think it was a year ago, there was a story that NPM, Node Package Management Registry, at some point when ChatGPT became popular, they stopped accepting new package workloads because there was actually a malware risk. You know how it worked out? Like ChatGPT became popular, Everybody in their enterprise were using it to start to write some code. And they would say, hey, ChatGPT, write me code for that, because everybody wants to do the job easier. They would get the code, they'd copy paste, and it wouldn't run because it needs installing a package, and the package name is there. So they would install the package that ChatGPT recommended. At that point, their computer is infected with malware. So what happened? Actually, bad actors, they observed what ChatGPT is doing, especially the earlier versions, and they noticed that ChatGPT sometimes hallucinates, and it can sometimes come up with a plausible name of package. So they just gathered all the frequent requests that user ask the system to write the code for, all the common packages that it hallucinates, and preemptively uploaded packages with exactly the same names, but instead of carrying out actual functionality, it contained malware. And the problem was such big that NPM had to pause uploads at some point. So long story short, large language models, they can hallucinate. It means that people should not trust them. There should be safety checks that ensure that there are no bad outcomes to the hallucination. Good thing is that actually LLMs hallucinate only because they're provided with wrong information and where they're used improperly. Like LLM will hallucinate if you don't provide only the required information to provide the answer, or if you make the task too complicated. So hallucinations can be solved. Unfortunately, this requires engineering effort. So the biggest challenge with hallucinations is that companies will not invest enough in engineering efforts to manage and mitigate the risks of hallucinations. And additional things or issues or risks with LLMs is that data leaks, data privacy. So once again, these can be usually mitigated by having large language models running completely within the security perimeter. There is also a possibility of having confidential computing, but it is just a standard that is just being developed. It requires cooperation and integration between the hardware, between the GPU providers, between the operating system. And I think only NVIDIA H100 supports confidential computing. So it's just getting started, so it's not widespread. So long story short, there are lots of issues. It's possible to mitigate the risk pretty much in all of them, but it requires additional engineering effort. And the problem is that companies sometimes are not willing to take in or do this extra investment.
Continuing on the subject of challenges, many corporations not only don't know how to use the data, but also what data do they have. And so to figure that out, they need to conduct data discovery and assessment, which raises the question of who's going to do it, right? And so the question is, what is the better way to conduct data discovery integration, and who will get it done?
Ideally, people who do data discovery are the domain experts. These are the people who know the business inside out. And you cannot just magically invite a consulting company, ask them to do data discovery, and then expect great results. Simply because these people didn't have enough real world experience in your specific domain, because every business is pretty much unique. At the same time, companies usually don't have enough high level understanding what actually is it needed to get the data from existing environment and how it has to be massaged and transformed to be usable by large language models. So the effort has to be twofold. So first of all, if we're trying to take an existing business and transform it to be slightly more efficient through the usage of LM power systems, we need a team that has an expertise with multiple AI cases and understands what it actually takes to get a potential project from idea to implementation, to get through all the ups and downs and avoid any pitfalls. And this team has to work in collaboration with the experts from the business who actually know the nuances of their data, the nuances of how it's being structured, stored. And the best approach that worked so far, I'm sharing trade secrets now. When a team that is external, that is building an AI, it has a lot of AI expertise, and they're working with the company to create and train essentially a dedicated AI assistant for the business stakeholders. And the system, it can be delivered fast. Initially, it will be naive and not helping much. But they will work together to train the system, to provide it with the business insights, to provide it with access to the APIs. So in essence, the external team, software vendor that is building AI, they create the scaffolding, they create like the backbone of the system, but the flesh and blood will have to come from the businesses. So basically it's twofold effort, and when this is done in tandem, that's where I've seen the high success rate of implementing LLM driven solutions in businesses.